Welcome to Minerva Meets. I'm your host, Sonal Chandler, and this is episode 22. Today, we're talking about a part of your business that often flies under the radar: how you get paid. If you're using outdated, unsecured systems, you could be exposing sensitive data, risking compliance violations, and even inviting fraud. Payment processing isn't just about moving money, it becomes a critical part of your cybersecurity and compliance footprint. And to help us break it all down, I'm joined by Mike Kintz from Wingman Payments. He's here to help us uncover the hidden risks and smarter paths forward for small to mid-sized organizations. Mike, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got started?
My name's Mike. I am the founder and president of Wingman Payments. I've been in the payment processing and financial services industry since 1995. So when we started in this industry, we were using dial-up credit card terminals that typically plugged into the back of fax machines, if you
Oh,
know what
wow.
it was. Uh, and one of the little known facts that always surprises people is I've been in the credit card processing industry before McDonald's actually accepted credit cards. When
Wow.
people don't realize that was right around 2000 is when McDonald's started.
Really? Oh my goodness, I had no idea.
Yeah, they started taking credit cards when people started moving off dial-up to IP because
Mhm.
each transaction didn't have to dial out for a connection. So it sped up the transaction to where it was faster than cash.
Sure,
Once the
sure.
transaction was faster than cash, then McDonald's adopted.
Wow.
And Visa, MasterCard also had some incentives for the quick serve.
Oh, sure. Sure.
So I've been doing that. I worked for Wells Fargo Merchant Services through my career. Was with a company called First Data, which was one of the larger processors in the industry. Worked for a couple different banking programs, one of them being Sovereign Merchant Services, and also worked with Sam's Club Merchant Credit Card Processing for Fiserv. And then in 2009, I helped start an ISO, which is an independent sales organization with Fiserv called Merchant Pro Express. And then we sold that company in 2020. And then more recently in 2022 is when I started Wingman Payments. And we're kind of like a broker. We work with a lot of different processors and ISOs. Uh,
Gotcha.
and we basically are what I would call a portfolio manager, where we manage portfolios of merchants and help them navigate rates, pricing, risk management. And then we're also handle support and service for them. So you have more of a concierge level support with your merchant service provider than just calling into an 800 number that goes overseas.
Well, I would love to get into a little bit more about risk, but before we do, I have to tell you a story. I actually had a call with somebody today that said, "Well, why don't you just fax that over to me?" And I was like, "What year are we?"
I
I
don't
don't even,
that's
I was like, "I don't have a fax machine." Oh, it's funny that you mentioned that earlier, but let's get into it. So, you talk about risk management, and to be honest, I rarely think about payment processing, right? Because that's just not something that's at the forefront of the work that I do, but it's such an important piece to a business, and really curious to understand, like, what do most business owners overlook when it comes to how they get paid?
most business owners take the path of least resistance,
Hmm.
especially for your smaller mom and pop businesses and maybe work from home, a home-based business. A lot of times you'll see them use applications like Venmo or, these really, they're more of a consumer based peer to peer. It's really not meant for businesses. People
Hmm.
don't really understand the chargeback implications of, like, if you have a dispute with a business, Visa, MasterCard, if you go through those type of networks, you're going to have a better experience as far as knowing your customer. And
Hmm.
then also Visa looks at both sides of the fence as far as a chargeback, the merchant and the consumer. And a lot of times they'll make decisions protecting consumers because what a lot of people don't realize is most fraud in the industry isn't done by cardholders, it's done by the merchants.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because you'll be in a busy restaurant and your sales are a little bit down, and maybe you have some card information. You might run a couple extra sales or something like that. And, unless you have a customer that's really monitoring their cards, you may not even catch it or know that they did it.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Stuff like that happens.
Oh my goodness. Well, why is payment processing more than just this back office function today? It seems like it's its own department almost, right?
Yeah. Well, merchant services is cash flow.
Mhm.
So when we handle a business, like a restaurant, for instance, might be 80 to 100% of their sales is credit cards.
Mm.
So we basically, their entire cash flow is dependent on their point of sale system and the merchant service providers who are supporting their company. E-commerce companies and a lot of e-commerce in different industries don't realize rules and regulations around chargebacks and stuff like that. A
Hmm.
business owner just starts a business not realizing maybe chargeback rules. So maybe they want to take a stiffer policy as no refund policy. And then all of a sudden they start getting chargebacks and losing them. And then the next thing they know, the merchant service provider is holding funds, freezing funds because their chargeback rates are running 5, 6% of sales,
Hmm.
which Visa, MasterCard finds unacceptable. And a lot of acquiring banks will actually shut down merchant accounts that are running chargeback rates that high.
Wow.
So these are things that merchants just don't realize. And then once it happens, they get very frustrated with because they just feel like the acquiring banks are just stealing their money because these are my sales. And they don't understand that the way the merchant agreements work is, they have to follow certain compliance and have to meet certain standards. And if they don't, they'll be taken off the network.
Interesting. That's makes it that sounds very similar to some of the work that I do, right? So when I walk into an organization and I'm trying to either do a security assessment or some type of AI assessment, trying to keep people from going directly to all the tools and the shiny objects and really first developing some type of strategy and thinking through, how do we want to implement this before they just
That's,
start implementing? And so it sounds very similar to the work that I do.
yeah, especially when you deal with like people don't understand the differences between like a company like ours and what we do is we underwrite every merchant account.
Mhm.
So when I sit down and talk to you, I understand your business. I understand your average ticket. I understand your business cycle, your time frame for delivery. So our underwriters kind of understand exactly how you do business. So the underwriting's been done on the front. What people don't understand is when you go through a service like Stripe or Square or PayPal or another what we call aggregator. And what an aggregator is when they basically have a merchant account and you're processing through their merchant account. So
Mhm.
there's little to no underwriting done on the front end. And that's why Stripe will get an account up and running in minutes.
Yeah.
Literally, you'll apply for an account and you're processing a few minutes later because they've
Wow.
done no underwriting. They don't understand your business. And for somebody that doesn't understand the industry, they start processing through Stripe and they start running sales and they start integrating with their website and doing all these cool things that Stripe can do. And there's nothing, the Stripe's not a bad service. So I don't want it to be taken that way. But what ends up happening is the underwriting's done on the back end. So if all of a sudden you're putting Stripe's merchant account at risk because you're running lots of chargebacks or really large tickets with long time frames for delivery, Stripe will start holding funds or shut down your account on the back end as well. And that's a much different conversation when somebody's holding thousands of your dollars
Yes.
versus dealing with me on the front end, going through the underwriting process. We might take a little bit longer to get approved, but we're far less likely to have situations like that occur. So it can be a better long-term experience. So
Yeah, that's great. And I'm glad that you're exposing some of this information because I think a lot of us don't really understand that whole life cycle and really what that journey looks like. And for you to explain that is super helpful. And, kind of makes me think about different things to ask customers, when I'm engaging with them. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Let's talk a little bit about payment processing in the systems. So, where do you find that small businesses tend to maybe go wrong? And that might not be the right word, go
Well,
wrong with payment systems?
I think a lot of times, especially now that technology is becoming more and more integrated with payments, where before you used to get a standalone credit card machine,
Mhm.
and you would just run your payments through this device, and then you'd have your point of sale that would do your inventory and different things like that. And now what's happening is these systems are integrated. And what's happening is you're getting a lot of what we call proprietary platforms.
Mhm.
And what a proprietary platform is where they have a point of sale system. And then they also have integrated processing, and you have to use their credit card processing. And a lot of times they kind of it gets into a situation where you have this captive audience.
Yeah.
So usually the pricing isn't as competitive in platforms like that because they know you can't go anywhere.
Right.
And once you integrate into a platform like that and you start utilizing it, it's very tough to get off that platform because you might have reward programs or inventory reporting. You might have customer information in there you use for marketing. And then all of a sudden, you have someone like me come in and takes a look at the processing. And I had this happen with an orthodontist the other day where when I reviewed their processing statements, they were paying almost 7% on their credit card processing.
Oh, wow.
And this isn't uncommon. You see it a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and you see it in all types of different industries. And so now we're in conversations with their credit card platform, the integrated solution, trying to help them negotiate rates down. But those vendors know that it's a captive, they're
Right.
kind of captured in, it makes it difficult to negotiate those rates down, but it's something that we're working on. So that's probably one of the biggest areas that companies make errors in the beginning is they don't ask the questions. The other thing people don't realize is the rate that you get quoted on the front end. The way every merchant service agreement's written out there is as long as they give you 30 days notice, they can change the terms and conditions of your agreement.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. Okay.
and so unless you're monitoring your statements and really monitoring every letter you get from your processor, any letter or communication you get could be some type of rate increase or change. In our industry, every April and October, there's some interchange changes. A lot of processors will use those to pad their margins where they'll get their marketing department to write up these really cool statement messages that make it sound like Visa, MasterCard, and we're just doing this. But in actuality, a lot of times they're passing extra fees and little increases on to increase their margins. And unless you know the industry and you kind of understand what's going on, you may not even be aware of it.
Wow.
And interchange isn't always bad because there are times where new technology comes out and they actually lower interchange rates because the actual risk is less risk. So
Mhm.
they're able to lower interchange rates to the merchants. There are times where it's not always bad on the statement messages, but it's
Right.
just something to know and be able to monitor.
So, how would a business know? Oh, I need to look out for this. Is it something, do they engage with someone like you guys, or, what is the best way to be in the know?
I think business owners that have been around a while and had several merchant accounts know kind of what to look for. But if for a newer business owner that hasn't
Yeah.
done this, when you look at your merchant statement, there's usually a section for notes or notices, especially around April and October, like March, April timeframe, September, October timeframe. Really, you should look every month at those notices and just check to see what's there. But that's usually where they'll let you know. And then there's a 30-day notice, that's your 30-day notice. So then the pricing will go in effect the next cycle.
Gotcha.
So I don't know if you've ever had a business with a merchant account and then, a couple of years go by and it just seems like, you know what? It seems like I'm paying more and more on this.
Yeah.
Probably,
Yeah, you're right, right. And then so you can negotiate that though, right? You can then go back and say, hey, let's lower this.
yeah, typically the way most processors will work is you call your processor on that notice
Mhm.
and say, I'm not okay with this. I don't want you to do this thing. I don't want this increase. A lot of times they'll waive it because they know most business owners never even look at it.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of people, I can tell you story after story where I'm talking to a business owner and they say, what do you need? Oh, I need your merchant statement. They go to a folder file and literally they pull out 6 or 7 months worth of statements and then they start opening. they've never even opened it. They just took the and just threw it in their filing cabinet.
Yeah,
So that's not uncommon.
sure. Sure. Do you find, that there's some hidden vulnerabilities in these payment platforms that are common that, maybe are overlooked by the business owner?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to these payment platforms, you definitely want to make sure that any systems that you're using or utilizing are compliant with
Mhm.
PCI DSS standards, which is Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards. The payment card industry has put a platform together, and they have regulations and rules as far as what meets these standards. So if you have a point of sale device that's certified with PCI, then what it basically is stating that this device meets all the payment card industry standards, meets the
Mhm.
encryption standards for when you're swiping card data through it, the connectivity ports and everything meet all the standards as far as what information's being supplied and how it's being handled. So if you're not using a system like that, you're putting your cardholder at risk.
Yeah.
And what happens a lot of times is you might be using a device that was compliant at one time, and
Yeah.
then for whatever reason, it's not compliant anymore. And typically what happens is you'll get terminals that'll go what they call end of life. And
Mhm.
basically what that means is they're not doing updates, security updates on those devices anymore. So it'd be very much in the, computer space where you might be using like Windows 8.
Right.
They're still using
Yes.
Windows 8. Well, they're not doing updates to Windows 8 anymore. So if you're using those platforms, your information's really at risk.
Yes.
So,
Absolutely. It's kind of like that when the whole CrowdStrike stuff happened and Southwest Airlines was proudly announcing that they were on these archaic systems. Right. That's not what we needed. Well, you just mentioned PCI compliance, and I know that that's a sweet spot for you. So I'd love to kind of dig into that a little bit. Tell us what that is, and well, tell our audience what that is, and let's jump into it.
yeah, so you have two sides of the coin, right? So you have the payment devices and the hardware vendors. They have to be PCI compliant and register their software. And then there's ongoing maintenance on PCI and their side. But there's also on the merchant side, there's payment card industry standards for merchants. And especially if you're one of those merchants or business owners that have cyber insurance, one of the requirements on any cyber insurance and security insurance like you're going to be using like that is that you're PCI compliant.
Yeah.
So the first thing that you need to produce is to show that you're compliant. And so with a merchant processor, you have a platform to log into and complete your annual questionnaire. And then also, if you are processing card data on an internet connection, meaning that you're swiping a card through an IP connection or a wireless connection, specifically Wi-Fi, then you should also be doing quarterly security scans on your network. And
Mm.
both of those things in conjunction with each other would allow you to be compliant, and you would have a compliant status. And there's paperwork that was provided to you to show you the passing scans. And then there's also a questionnaire that can be provided, as well as a certificate that shows that you're compliant till such and such date. And that
Yeah.
documents usually what your insurance provider is going to require. Otherwise, if you have a breach and you're not compliant, then it's basically going to allow them to deny your claim
Yeah.
because you were negligent on that.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do a little bit different than a lot of processors is we have a concierge service. So we assist our merchants in that because most business owners, they're running their business, whatever it is, whether it's pouring concrete, home
Right.
improvements, running a restaurant, running a retail store. You're not an IT professional. And so you go into your questionnaire and you have every intention of doing it and you start answering the questions in the questionnaire. And it seems like they're asking you the same question 450 different ways.
Hmm.
Most business owners are busy, and about 30 minutes into it, if not sooner, they're like, I'm not going to worry about this. And they don't do it. So
Right.
then what ends up happening is your processor will happily start charging you a non-PCI compliance fee. On the low end, those are usually about $25 to $30 a month. And there's some processors out there, if you stay non-compliant, those fees I've seen as high as $99 a month for non-compliance. So you're basically paying $1,200 a year
Yeah.
because you didn't do these things. So we really handhold our merchants going through that. And if they need to do the quarterly scans, we do that for them. And then we provide them the reporting back to Sean that's complete. In the event that they don't pass a quarterly scan, then we would work with their managed service provider or their internet person that handles their network to
Mhm.
give them the report that shows why they failed. And then their managed service provider to go in and make whatever updates need to be. And so that's a service that we provide. I don't know of too many other merchant service providers that are doing that for their clients. The
Yeah. In
main
fact,
reason why, I'll tell you the main reason why is because every processor, PCI non-compliance fees happen to be a revenue item for them. They make money on it.
oh, wow. Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, that when we were prepping, you had mentioned this concierge service, and I was really excited that you brought it up because I think that's important to really understand, as a business that, it is overwhelming of all the different things that you have to do, whether it's security or if it's setting up your business or setting up payment processing, right? These are all things that become overwhelming. And to know that there are people like Mike and Wingman Payments out there that can help you and guide you through that is something I really wanted us to get into. So thank you for bringing that up. Well, let's talk a little bit about AI because I never have a podcast that doesn't address AI. So I'm curious to really understand how AI is being leveraged within the payment processing world, and is it being embraced? What's going on there?
Yeah, AI is really being embraced by your financial institutions, especially on the card issuing side for the consumers. To some degree on the merchant side, but the card issuers are really using it. For instance, let's say they know your spending habits. So all of a sudden, if something's an anomaly, like you're running a payment that's outside your normal interactions, a lot of times, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but all
Yes,
of a
I
sudden
have.
you'll get a text from your issuing bank that says, "Hey, did you run this charge at Best Buy for this amount of money? Because maybe that's not a store you frequent at for that dollar amount." And then it gives you the opportunity to say, yes, that was in fact me. Or in the event that it wasn't you, it's your opportunity to say, no, that wasn't me. And I have a real life story of this is my wife was in California and I was sitting at my house in Georgia.
Mhm.
All of a sudden my phone pops up is like, you just spent this much money at Home Depot. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird. And then a few minutes later, I get another one that says, you just spent this much money at Best Buy. And I'm
Oh,
like, okay. So I called my wife. I was like, what are you doing? She's like, what are you? I was like, you just spent all this money at these two stores. She goes, nine. I'm like,
oh,
well, you used your card. I can see it's your card number. And she went into her wallet. She had been pickpocketed. Like literally a half hour earlier, she didn't know.
oh my God.
Yeah. And if it was my card issuer notifying me that, they reversed all the charges and everything.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's the type of stuff where AI is being used. And then you're also the other thing that merchants don't realize, but if you do payment links and QR codes and stuff like that, a lot of people think, well, is that secure? It's
Mhm.
extremely secure. And here's why. When you scan that QR code and you're authorizing that payment, you're authorizing it with your thumbprint or facial recognition, and your card issuer knows your phone. They know it was your phone that you utilized, and they also get a record to know that it was your thumbprint or facial recognition that authorized it. So from the merchant's point of view, it's much harder to declare fraud. That was a
Right.
fraudulent transaction. So from a merchant's perspective, by utilizing some of these advanced technologies, it's actually a more secure payment, and
Mhm.
it's less likely that your people are going to be claiming fraud and things of that nature. You know, those that's where I think most of the AI is being used is more on the risk mitigation side.
Mhm.
There's also some really unique technology that a lot of merchants maybe aren't aware of from the merchant side. is there's a product called 3D Secure.
Okay.
And what 3D Secure does is it basically gathers extra information at the point of sale. And a lot of the services now are doing this behind the scenes without
Hmm.
really extending the length of the time of the transaction.
Okay.
Uh, what 3D Secure, when it first came out, you had to have when someone was online and buying something and you did 3D Secure, they had to fill out extra fields and extra information, which caused more shopping cart abandonment. So
Sure.
a lot of people didn't want to use them. A lot of this is being done now without doing that. But what happens is once the card issuer approves the transaction with 3D Secure, the card issuer is assuming the risk on the transaction and removing the chargeback liability from the
Oh,
merchant.
wow. Oh,
So it
wow.
will dramatically, by using services like this, it can dramatically lower chargeback
Mm,
rates. You will probably get a few more declines because if the card issuer doesn't want to take the risk on the
sure.
chargeback for whatever reason on the transaction, they felt that it didn't score high enough,
Hmm.
then the merchant has the ability to take that transaction if they feel, but they would still be liable for the chargeback in that case.
Super interesting. And I actually experienced a similar incident like you mentioned with the Home Depot and Best Buy charges, but mine were international, where they were coming in from Poland and
Oh, wow.
a bunch of computers were purchased, but my credit card company did, refund the money. But yeah, no, it was great to just get the alert immediately, be able to get that resolved. And fraud detection is a great area for AI, right? So, um, love it. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I love that you've shared all of these insights. But before we wrap up here, I always like to ask my guests if there was one thing that you would want people to take away from our discussion, what would that be?
I think with merchant services, especially with merchant services, is service is a big part of it. And I think that most merchant service companies are going more and more and more to less service, more to chat bots and more stuff like
Hmm.
that. And where Wingman Payments is going is we pride ourselves. Our slogan is we've got your six. And we want to put the personal service back in merchant services. And
Hmm.
that's really what I want people to know about our company particularly.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I have to ask you, Wingman Payments, tell me a little bit about how that name came about before we sign off here.
I wish I had a great story, but when you were starting a company, I didn't want a .net or a .co or a dot whatever. I wanted dot. So I was on GoDaddy and I was just typing in different names. And when I typed in Wingman Payments, I like the connotation of us being your wingman in business, that
Yeah.
we have your six, we have your support. So I did kind of have that thought process around it, and it was available. .com was available. So I grabbed it, and it's actually been a blessing because when people hear our name and stuff, I get jokes and stuff like that. To say,
Yeah.
will you be my wingman? I was like, well,
It's a great marketing slogan, too. It's amazing. Love it. Well, thank
yeah.
you so much for being a guest and for sharing your insights. Please tell our audience where they can find you and how they can get in touch with you.
No. You can reach us at info@wingmanpayments.com. Wingmanpayments.com is our website. And if you wanted to call us and talk to us, our best phone number is 470-822-8683.
And you cannot fax them. Let me just.
Yeah, we don't have a fax number, but we do support email, and we have plenty of ways that you can upload documents on our website.
Yes, and I will put all of this stuff in the show notes so you can contact Mike directly. Just want to remind everybody that if you'd like to contact Minerva Consulting, you can reach out to Let's Talk at minervaconsultinginc.com, or you can go to our website at minervaconsultinginc.com. And before we sign off here, I'd like to ask our listeners to take 3 quick next steps. Number 1, to subscribe to the podcast. Number 2, leave a rating. And lastly, please add a comment. I love to read all of them. Again, Mike, thank you so much for being on the show, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks.